We get analysis of the LA Kings 5 draft picks selected in this year's NHL Draft from our NHL Draft Scout next on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 16 years, and of course, a passionate LA Kings fan for 30 years. This episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Well, the LA Kings just wrapped their development camp on Monday, and all 5 of their 2023 draft picks were in attendance to get their first taste of what's going to be like to be an NHL player, hopefully, in their future. Obviously, there's a long road to go for each of those players, but again, getting their career started and keeping their dreams alive, and hopefully, again, will be a key piece of the LA Kings going forward, if not with the Kings, and maybe a piece of a trade that helps to bring a key player to the Kings. You never know how these things are going to work out. But to get more detail on the 5 players the LA Kings selected, we are happy to welcome in the host of Locked On NHL Prospects and our NHL Draft analyst. His name is Hadi Kalakeche. Hadi, I know it has been a very busy time for you, and we really appreciate your time joining us to talk about the Kings draft picks. Are you there, Hadi? I'm not hearing you. There we go.
There we go. I think we're good now. Yeah, thanks for having me
good.
on. More than happy to discuss the Kings picks. Some great options in there. So, yeah, let's get it started.
Yeah, we had a little glitch there for a second. I know you had, I saw on Twitter, you had lost your internet for a few days. That's got to be not fun.
Yeah, a good 5-6 days without internet will do that too. I'm actually at my girlfriend's place right now because the internet's still not back on. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's a thing, but we make it work.
All right. Well, thanks for going the extra mile for us. We appreciate it. Let's just start off with a real general question. Just your takeaway from this year's NHL draft. Did things kind of go as expected, or how did it go?
I feel like there's been a bit of a regression towards safety again. We've seen a bit more risky picks from teams in recent years, but this year was really, I saw a lot of players who I feel are very kind of surefire bets, but not really high upside bets that went in the first round, early second, mid second, that kind of thing. And I feel like that still frees teams up to then take riskier picks later on in the draft. But you've got the inverse of teams that are ahead of the curve, like Carolina, which every single one of their picks was a high risk, high reward pick, really. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but I feel like overall, in general, I felt a bit more regression towards the kind of, this guy's going to be a surefire, bottom 6 NHLer or a surefire third pair defenseman. Let's take him high. Whereas you would see teams a bit more hesitant to take those picks high end in early years. But that's kind of a general idea. There were some teams, like I mentioned, Carolina, Columbus is one. There were sort of exceptions to that rule.
Now, I know the Kings usually have been a team not afraid to make moves up or down or sacrifice picks to get more picks or go into a place where they would rather be to go after a player, but they didn't do that. Not one movement they didn't make exactly where they were slotted going into the draft is exactly where they picked. And I know the first round of the draft, there was no movement whatsoever at all. Was that expected or was that a surprise?
That was a surprise to me, especially given the amount of talent that was going up and down in the draft. Some guys went in the top 20 that could have been in the 40s. So I expected some teams to trade up in order to get a guy that they potentially had in their top 10 who slipped into the 20s, that kind of thing. But really no movement at all. Most of the movement happened before the draft. A couple teams, including the Habs, traded the 2 of their picks, that kind of thing. But nothing at the draft table was really, really surprising to me. We saw a couple trades at the end and on day 2. Namely the last pick of the draft getting traded to Columbus so they can go and pick Tyler Peddle, which was pretty interesting. But for me, I believe this is the first in a very long while that we've seen no movement at all on draft day 1 in terms of picks getting traded.
And the Kings didn't have a first round pick. Now, they they sacrificed their first round pick to try and go for it this past year. And I think there's always, fans are always going to be in favor of being aggressive and going for it if you think you have an opportunity. That said, was this a bad draft to not have a first round pick?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, once you hit what was first pick was pick 54. I feel by that range you've run out of the kind of high end prospects that were available. For me, there was about 40, 45 players I would have said were, borderline first round caliber. So once you get to the 50s, most of those guys are gone, and those that are left are mainly guys that are dropping into the 90s, into the hundreds, players that are dropping out of teams rankings fully for various reasons, whether it's off ice stuff, whether it's interview bombing, that kind of thing. But really in this range, I feel the Kings did well with the picks they had. Despite that, I just feel that any team that had 2, 3, maybe even 4 picks in the top 50 was laughing based on the value that was there. There was a lot of really, really good value in this draft.
All right, let's get to the LA Kings' first selection. It came in round number 2, as you mentioned, the 54th overall pick. They went with a big defenseman from Czechia. His name is Jakub Dvorak. Just turned 18 years old in May. 6'5", 210 pounds. I believe he was the biggest player selected in this year's draft. A left-handed shot. What can you tell us about this selection?
He was definitely among the biggest, definitely the biggest in that range. Dvorak strikes me as a really safe pick. He was one of those guys who I felt was going to be is considered low ceiling, high floor type of guy. I really like the defensive game on him. He's a very physical guy, but he's also surprisingly mobile for his size, which is why he was kind of considered in this range. I'm a bit lower on him based on the lack of offensive upside. I don't see him as a guy who's necessarily going to be a scorer. Any type of 30-plus point production would be absolutely surprising for me out of Dvorak, but he's definitely going to shut down opposing lines. He's going to play on your, borderline second pair, more likely third pair. He's going to be shutting down opponents, disrupting opponents' cycle physically, and just getting involved with his reach, his stick. His mobility is pretty impressive, especially when it comes to getting out of his zone, making plays quickly. He doesn't activate into the offensive zone. He kind of stops at the offensive blue line. That's the furthest he's going to go. And he's often the last man back in the formation. So as soon as there's a turnover, he's bombing up the ice the opposite way in order to be the last man back in order to defend. It's a mindset thing with him. You're never going to get a producer out of him just because the mindset is so defense oriented. But in terms of defensive defensemen, I don't think you really get much better than Dvorak at this point in the draft.
I know there were some injury issues with him. I know you're no doctor, but how much do you think that affected where he was taken in the draft?
There's always a concern with big guys who get injured often, because often as a result of their size, it's a result of them being lanky and not having weight in the right places. I think that with time, and with enough surrounding involvement from development staff, you can get him to a point where his turn for his injuries. It's the type of thing where you're worried, because these kinds of guys, when they get injuries to their knees, their ankles, their careers are done, because a lot of what they do depends on their ability to be able to pivot quickly, to be able to keep up with forwards as they rush the opposite way. Because in today's NHL, you can it's obviously good to be big, but you have to be mobile no matter what size you are. And if Dvorak loses that mobility, it's a risk. But I feel like he's got enough defensive acumen, and he's got a frame that he can fill into, which is really important for him. I feel like at the end of the day, you're probably going to be getting a 6'6", 225, 230-pound defensive defenseman out of Dvorak, which you rarely find those outside of the top 2 rounds in the NHL, just based on what teams want. I'm pretty sure if the Kings didn't pick him up there, he wasn't going to slip much out of the second round. So, in terms of the value here, obviously it is a concern with the injuries, but not to a point where it makes it not worth it at 54. 54 is when you start, especially if you're a team looking for a safe pick, you start looking at these guys for sure.
All right, Hadi, 1 down, 4 more to go. We'll get more into the Kings draft picks coming up in just a second here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. But this episode of Locked on LA Kings, your team every day, brought to you by Bird Dogs. What are Bird Dogs? Well, simply put, Bird Dogs are shorts with underwear built in. It might sound weird, but I ask you, is comfort weird? Is looking good weird? Absolutely not. And these shorts are comfortable and look good. A lot of different colors to choose from. And how often does something that looks good really feel good too? It's a perfect combination. I wear my bird dogs out to dinner. Also, could use them and wear them because they're durable to work out in, or maybe even do some yard work. No matter what you choose or how you choose to wear them, you're going to look good and you're going to feel good. So go to birddogs.com/lockedon. And when you enter the promo code LOCKEDONNHL, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dog Yeti style tumbler with every order, which is nice. Again, that's birddogs.com, birddogs.com. Enter the promo code LOCKEDONNHL for your free gift. All right, we welcome back in Hadi Kalakeche, who's going to talk more about the LA Kings draft picks. And with the Kings' third selection, actually, you know what? I think I skipped somebody. I did. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Second selection for the Kings was in the third round, the 78th overall pick, and they took right winger Cohen Ziemer. He's Canadian, 19 years old. He's going to turn 19 in December. 6 foot 210, right-handed shot. Played for Prince George in the Western Hockey League last year. 41 goals, 48 assists for 89 points. So pretty offensive upside kind of a player. Tell us about Cohen Ziemer.
Colin Ziemer is a demon in terms of the intensity, the physicality. He just pushes people around. He loves to throw his weight around. He's really aggressive and borderline violent, but not to a point where he's getting penalized for it. But on top of that, he's got a wicked release. He can really shoot that puck, especially from mid to long range. He's not afraid to take those chances. Sometimes it's to a fault, which is mainly why he slipped, is some of his habits aren't necessarily translatable to the NHL. He's the type of guy who's going to try to shoot from everywhere, but the skill set is definitely there. I also saw some flashes of playmaking. I really want to emphasize their flashes are really not kind of recurrent, regular elements of his game, but from time to time, you'll see him make a slip pass, make an area pass, just something that shows a tiny bit of intelligence. But the habits need to come a long way. The skating isn't all that there. I also don't see much inside lane driving from him. So he was one guy that I had in kind of my 40s. Him and Riley Heidt were a dynamic duo in the WHL. They were probably the most lethal duo in the WHL, them together. 2 draft eligibles that went into this draft, highly touted. Again, the habits need to come some way. I think that a lot of the work with Ziemer is going to be a bit more long-term once he's 22, 23, 24, playing in the AHL. That's when it's kind of the make or break moment for Ziemer because he's going to be picking up a lot of those habits, but he's the type of player you take a swing on at this range. What was it, 78? It's a lot lower than I would have had him. In the 40s, I would have started considering him just based on the skill set, based on the flashes that I saw. But again, habits need to come a long way. And 22 to 24, once he's in the AHL and working his way up, that's when we're really going to see what Ziemer's made of at the NHL level.
When I talked to you before the draft, I told you the Kings are definitely looking to strengthen themselves in net. They only had 2 goalies under contract at the time. And we don't know if the future of what they have in net is in the organization at this point. So we knew they'd take a goalie, and they did, in fact, take the goaltender with their third selection, 4th round, 118th overall. And that was Hampton Solkinski from Warroad High School in Minnesota. Turned 18 a couple of days after the draft, 6'1", 180, catches with his left hand. This season in high school, as you might imagine, put up some gaudy record, 28-1-1. The goals against average was under 1.5, 941 save percentage, 9 shutouts. He was named the top high school goaltender in the state of Minnesota, which is not bad. Just your thoughts on this very young goaltender.
So the thing is with U.S. high school games, they're very difficult to get a hand on in terms of tape. So I haven't really watched much of Solkinski. I've watched his 1 game in the USHL with the NTDP. I think he came in during a blowout or something like that, didn't allow a goal in. But in terms of what I've heard from him, heard very, very good things from people that have watched him a lot more than I have. We talk about a lot of his athleticism, very energetic and dynamic goaltender in net. He uses that kind of shorter stature in order to surprise players when he's going left to right, post to post, that kind of thing. I've heard that he does need to work on his technical abilities. He needs to work on his posture and positioning. That's one thing that needs to improve. But pretty much everything I've heard from him, it just screams long-term project. He's the type of guy who you're going to have to wait a long time in order to see kind of flourish. But the mindset is there. The energy that he brings is very difficult to teach in netminders. A lot of netminders are more of the poised, composed, calm to a fault type of profile. So he's definitely a different brand of goaltender than what we're used to in the top end. But if you're looking for a goalie, at 118th, most of the high end goalies that I believe have top, starter upside were gone by then. I'm talking Jacob Fowler, Michael Hrabal, Adam Gayon, and Trey Augustine, which are the main ones I was looking at for the Kings. But at this point, taking him is not the end of the world. He's got some bloodlines as well in terms of pro. He has a father who played pro, a brother who's working his way up as well. So, definitely the type of swing you take if you're the Kings. And when you put up the numbers that he put up, the Minnesota high school program isn't the worst by any measure in terms of high school programs. It's one of the best, and to put up numbers like he did, it's pretty kind of interesting to kind of evaluate from there and see where he works. But I believe he is due to be playing in the USHL next year. I'm not sure. I don't think it's going to be with the NTDP. I think it's going to be with one of the parallel programs. But in 2024-25, he's going to Northern Michigan. Not really the most renowned program in order to develop NHL goaltenders, but we'll see where he goes from there. He's definitely a project that'll take a long while.
I know that, and again, it's for what it's worth. He looked very good in their final scrimmage of the development camp this past Monday. So it's, I mean, his first taste of professional hockey for him to, get some attention, turn some heads, always a decent sign. I did want to ask you, is it rare for a player to be selected directly out of their high school program? Is that something that's a little unusual?
In the 4th to 7th rounds, it's very not unusual. I mean, we've seen mainly we'll see forwards, a lot of forwards, especially the top forwards in high school programs get drafted. I don't remember the last time I've seen a high school goaltender get drafted who became much, but I'll look into that and we'll kind of go from there. But again, the numbers speak for themselves. The record speaks for itself. He lost 2 games in the entire season in the high school league. So there's definitely something to work from there. And I don't remember the last time I've seen a goaltender with this level of production, this level of numbers, get drafted out of the high school program. So he's kind of a unicorn in his own sense, but like I said, he played a game with the NTDP. He was okay. So, he's definitely the type of guy who, if he had played in the USHL with the NTDP the entire year as a backup to Trey Augustine, for example, would probably have done a good job and gotten drafted in about the same range. So, I'm sure that the scouts, the goalie scouts in LA have done more than their fair share of homework on him and made sure that he was the right selection for them, because there were a couple other guys that could have gone here in terms of goaltenders, but if they see something in him, they see something in him.
All right, couple more players to talk about. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Take your first swing of betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets. That's up to $200. And that's right, just $20 bet, and you can land $200 in a bonus bet, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think will hit the first home run. It's on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There is no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get your $200 in a bonus bet. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, wrapping it up with Hadi Kalakeche, our NHL Draft scout and the co-host of Locked On NHL Prospects. The Kings' 5th selection. Why do I keep skipping ahead? I don't want to skip ahead. Their 4th selection in the 5th round, 150th overall pick. They took defenseman Matthew Mania, which is a fun name. He was from Brandon, Florida. Turned 18 years old this past January. 6'1", 190, right-handed shot. Played for the Sudbury Wolves in the OHL, had 10 goals, 28 assists, 38 points in 67 games this season. He was unfortunately unable to participate in the on-ice activities at development camp because of an upper body injury, but he was there, took part in, just getting a taste of what it's like, visiting the facilities, being around maybe some of his teammates in the future. But what can you tell us about Matthew Mania?
So basically, you take everything I said about Jakub Dvorak and just flip it on its head, and you have Matthew Mania. He's just, I don't remember the last time I've seen a prospect whose name fits the way he plays more perfectly.
Huh.
Just very, very manic, very chaotic in terms of what he does on the ice. Really, really good with the puck. The way he's able to cut inside forwards and access the offensive blue line with the puck, and sometimes he'll even threaten the slot and take a shot from there. He's very daring with the puck, very manipulative with it as well. So a lot of the offensive habits he have are very impressive to me. He's one guy I had ranked higher than Dvorak, actually. I had him ranked in the 40s, 50s.
Wow.
So this value at 150 for me is fantastic. This is the best pick the Kings made in this draft, in my opinion. Again, just the way he's able to slice through players in the neutral zone in order to access the offensive blue line, it's next to none almost in this draft. So just if he works on his defensive game, if he works on his skating, becoming even more elusive, more agile, and just making sure that he's able to read opponents when they try to do the same thing that he does with the puck, he's going to be a fantastic defender. The upside with him, especially offensively, is really high, but it's a high risk, high reward pick. The type of pick that you absolutely make with a pick at 150. I was astounded he was available that low, and I wasn't surprised to see the Kings pick him up because he's got that kind of risk to him that the Kings usually go for.
And with the Kings' fifth and final selection in the sixth round, 182nd overall, they selected right winger Ryan Comrie, originally from Alexandria, Virginia. He's committed to play at the University of New Hampshire. Turned 19 in October. He's 5'10", 190, right-handed shot. 60 games for Sioux City Musketeers in the USHL, 33 goals, 29 assists, 62 points in 60 games. And he had a very nice final scrimmage on Monday with 2 goals in the scrimmage for the LA Kings. So that was nice to see. But what can you tell us about Ryan Comrie?
Ryan Comrie tells me that the LA Kings have an analytics department that they trust with their later round picks because his points per 60 in the USHL were, I believe, second only behind Gavin Thorson, who wasn't even drafted. But in terms of the points per 60, he was up there with all the draft eligibles. He was ahead of Jaden Perron, who was drafted in the 90s, a guy who I had highly touted. Now, the thing is with Comrie is he's got a lot of fantastic habits with the puck. He loves to cut inside. He loves to threaten the middle. He loves to draw players in and then make passes or take shots through them, which is really good. For me, it's just what does he do once he's in that middle lane, once he does the right thing in order to access the right pockets of space. For me, it kind of falls apart for him at times where he'll try to take a shot when he should pass. He'll try to pass when he should shoot. The decision-making once he's in those areas, the scanning habits once he's in those areas to identify the right options isn't all there. But we're talking about a 6th-round pick. And if you're getting a guy who scored above a point per game in the USHL in his draft year at 182nd overall, you're laughing. That's great value. And, those are the bets you take. You listen to your analytics teams when they say, usually when a guy produces a point per game in the USHL in their draft year, they're going to be good. That's more often than not the case. So you just listen to your analytics team, take that swing, and at 180, and he's got the frame. He's 5'10", but he looks bigger than that. He plays bulkier than that, and he has no problem getting across defenders to the middle of the ice. So it's not like he's getting pushed off pucks. It's not like he's getting out-muscled in those battles to the middle. So there's a lot to like in this pick. He's one guy I've watched maybe 3 or 4 times just in passing in this year's draft. I expected him to go in the late rounds. And again, not surprised that the Kings went for this pick.
I don't know if you give out draft grades. I saw, looking kind of generally speaking at several different analysts, they had the Kings at around a C+. Would you agree with that? Or what would you give this draft class? And considering the Kings did not have a 1st-round pick, how high could they have really, are they going to get like at most like a B grade?
I'd say, C+, B- is where I'd put them. The Jakub Dvorak trade kind of drops the grade a bit because, again, he's the type of guy who just screams safe in terms of, I want to keep my job. I'm a scout in the NHL. I just want a guy who's going to make the NHL, which is, it's definitely an option. But for me, the picks of Matthew Mania and Ryan Comrie and especially Cone Zemer, those 3 picks bump that grade up to, I'd say I'm more comfortable giving a B- than a C+. Keep it at a B.
And real quick, any teams as far as rivals for the Kings in the Pacific Division that maybe stood out in the draft, or how do the Kings compare to some of the Pacific Division teams?
Yeah, it's hard to compare with the San Jose Sharks when they come out of the 1st round with Will Smith and Quentin Musty. I mean, that fantastic 1-2 punch in the first round. Will Smith is almost definitely going to be a top 6 player, more likely than not a top liner. Quentin Musty is one of the most underrated players in this class. I had him ranked 13th. He went 26. He's a type of guy who's going to be a nightmare to face. Outside of that, they drafted Kasper Haltonen, who's pretty good in terms of a power forward scorer style. They had Luca Cagnoni, who was one of my highest ranked defensemen, who they picked at the 123rd. So a really great, well-rounded draft for them. And Seattle also had a good one. Picked up a couple of high-risk, high-reward defensemen that I would like to see the Kings pick. They picked Lukas Dragicevic 3 picks after Jakub Dvorak, who is the complete opposite of Dvorak, where Dragicevic is probably the worst rush defender I've ever seen, but offensively, he's a monster. So, that would have been a pick I would have liked to see the Kings take, just a bit more risk, to get a potential maybe number 4 defenseman rather than an almost guaranteed bottom pair guy. And then they picked Caden Price right after in the 80s, who's a bit of the same. I'd say a better rush defender for sure than Dragicevic, but very, very inconsistent. I don't know how much of that you can blame on playing with Kelowna. But at the end of the day, those stand out to me. And also their first 3 picks, Edward Schala, Carson Rakoff, and Oscar Fisker-Molgaard, are just really good picks for where they selected. So I'd say of the 2 between San Jose and Seattle, I'd be more concerned about Seattle's draft because they picked up a lot of good value and took a lot of risks based on the picks that they the most upside out of their top 2 picks. So, it's pick and choose between those 2, but those 2 had really, really good drafts and are looking very promising, especially San Jose with the prospects they already have in the system. They're looking scary.
All right. That is Hadi Kalakeche. He is the host of Locked On NHL Prospects and our draft analyst. Hadi, always a pleasure. Really appreciate your time before and after the draft. Thanks for giving us your insights, and we'll try and check in on with you next year. Take a break, and hopefully you can get your internet figured out.
We'll see about that break, but thanks for having me on.
All right. Thank you. All right. That will do it for the show today. Appreciate everybody joining us, and I hope you enjoyed that content. For you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch every day, coming up on tomorrow's show, going to have a special player feature and some more. And of course, on Friday, we've got our Kings fan feedback show. All your questions and comments about anything involving the LA Kings. The email address, lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. Also can post your comments in the YouTube comment section as well. Thank you for watching this episode of Locked on LA Kings. Also want you to stay interactive with us on Instagram and Twitter. We are at Locked on LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this show, Locked on LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings, go.